Up until this week, I hadn't uploaded a video to YouTube since May of last year. I wonder how much I missed.
Tonight, intelligence from top-secret U.S. spy planes is providing startling details about China's spy operations.
Elon Musk has now completed his $44 billion deal to buy Twitter after months of legal battles. And he's changed his own Twitter title to Chief Twit.
Professor, I can just tell you that we have information that Donald Trump has now been formally arrested.
This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
The Supreme Court has reached a decision on the landmark Roe v. Wade case.
New tonight, President Joe Biden is renewing his call for a national assault weapons ban after the deadly mass shooting at a private school in Tennessee.
This is the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut in summer 2022. And this is what it looked like half a year later.
That's the moment, video showing Shinzo Abe being shot from behind while giving a campaign speech for his party's candidate.
America is reeling from the painful reality of another mass shooting.
This latest massacre at an elementary school in a small Texas town. Here is the latest at 10.
What the fuck?
And the Nazis, in my view, were thugs that shook people down, did a lot of really bad things.
But they did good things too. We're gonna stop dissing the Nazis all the time.
Okay.
It has been a really weird year, and not solely because of politics within the wider world, but just within my own minuscule version of reality. I've admittedly been dealing with some stuff, and it made exploring creative ventures all but impossible. No matter how hard I tried, I simply wasn't able to sit down and write, let alone devise unique video structure. Some of these difficulties are due to complications regarding physical issues I battle and the toll it's taking on my day-to-day, and others are with my mind. Without getting too deep into the reads, what I will share is that after many years of neglecting therapy due to the chaotic nature of veteran affairs and the absolute lack of stability and continuity of care within those services, I began receiving outside care, and so I've been seeing somebody about my PTSD. This inevitably opened up a lot of wounds as many memories came to the forefront, and it put me in a deep funk, one I'm still struggling to clamber out of. Admittedly, I don't believe this is the place to extensively fill a bunch of strangers in on my health issues, so I'm going to gloss over things now, but I thought I would quickly let you know what's been going on and why I vanished for as long as I did. I also just want to say thanks to everybody who didn't abandon my channel. It honestly means a lot. Anyways, mushy shit aside because fuck you all, it's been an eventful 13 months within the gaming and entertainment sphere, and there's a lot I never got to talk about. So this video exists as a way for me to play Ketchup. I'm just going to share opinions on various games, controversies, and things of that sort. Although, quick disclaimer, given what's been going on in my life, I don't have a lot of my own footage for everything I'll be discussing, as at the time I didn't think I'd be covering certain games, so I didn't record my playthroughs. Therefore, expect a lot of trailer footage throughout. Now, let's talk about Harry Potter. One of the biggest gaming controversies of the past year, and the one I most want to speak on, is the Hogwarts Legacy boycott and harassment campaign. Unless you've been mercifully living under a rock, then you're well aware that J.K. Rowling has become quite the controversial figure due to her stances on trans issues. On the one hand, this is a good thing because it finally forced terminally online millennials to remove fictional schoolhouses from their social media bios and to read a new book. But on the other, it has created a spectacular mess for anybody who so much as finds enjoyment with the Harry Potter franchise, and this came to an explosive head with the release of Hogwarts Legacy. Annoyingly, I know I can't talk about this subject without people clamoring for my thoughts on the author, so here it is. A lot of things J.K. Rowling said a few years ago, I agreed with. One of her statements that first created major backlash was really not all that bad. It seemed clear to me at the time that she wasn't bigoted or discriminatory towards trans people. As a trans person myself, I thought she was fairly rational in how she went about voicing some of her concern. I'm hardly a massive J.K. Rowling stan though, and I'm not hawk-eyeing every tweet she sends or likes, so I'm sure there's things I missed, but of what I saw, it was fine by me. Fast forward to now, and I think she's a bit more extreme with her views, and I think she associates with people who muddy the waters of honest debate. It's complicated though, and her current existence makes me think of the meme that says, "Who radicalized you?" And the answer is, you did. She has received a ton of backlash, death threats, and endless hate for years now, and this first started at a time where her views were not that particularly hateful. I think over time this beat her down, and she naturally began detesting certain movements and people more and more. That's not to defend it, but what can I say? She's only human. I don't bring her up in it, but it goes along with one of my core arguments in my trans activists are their own worst enemies video. But I digress. Because regardless of whether I like or dislike her or agree with her or disagree, and disclaimer, I don't think I like her, it doesn't change the fact that the media response to a Harry Potter video game was extreme and hypocritical as hell, and that is what I most want to talk about. The reaction to Hogwarts Legacy was numbskullery at its finest. For an industry rife with sexual abuse, horrendous working conditions, unfair wages, and foreign money from human rights abusing countries like Saudi Arabia, it was frustratingly silly watching as the media drew a line in the sand at the feet of a mean British lady. Countless articles were published lambasting anyone who so much as played it, often labeling them as uncaring bigots, and throughout social media, gamers were attacked by the drove if they expressed excitement for it. Reset Era, a gaming web forum popularized by its large contingent of game journalists, also went so far as to ban people for expressing excitement for the video game. Twitch streamers also bore a brunt of the abuse, as a number of them were brought to tears while playing the game because of the hate that enveloped them. It was, for lack of a better term, a harassment campaign, just one which wrapped itself in a blanket of performative and fraudulent moral superiority. If I could attach a label to it, it would be hypocrisy. On Twitter, I had a field day calling it out. Users were expressing things like how playing the game was a personal attack on their LGBT identities, and that they could never look at Hogwarts Legacy players the same. The problem is that a vast majority of these players were either Overwatch or Valorant players, two games which financially support countries with atrocious LGBT and human rights records, and which are made by studios with long and well-documented histories of abuse. One would think that if they were honest about how much they cared for their queer allies, then they would swear off games which benefit countries known to literally kill and imprison gay and trans people. I mean, come on, the money supporting those games will do infinitely more harm than whatever J.K. Rowling is likely to do with her Hogwarts Legacy payday. As an extra kicker, some writers who are freaking out over the game have articles published on Fanbyte, a website openly owned by Tencent, aka the corporate arm of China. I find this doubly more entertaining because those same writers are massive stans of the aforementioned Overwatch 2 and Valorant, games which by their perspective are gay, even though as I previously stated, they are developed by studios known for a number of massive ethical violations, on top of being heavily invested in by China and Saudi Arabia. I suppose the moral of their story is only Western gay lives matter. Now, before I go on, I want to stress that there's nothing wrong with enjoying games which fund unsavory actors. In fact, it'd be nigh impossible to find one which doesn't. I understand that the world we reside on is horribly unjust and filled to the brim with awful things which I technically support with my finances. The phone in my pocket contains rare earth mineral... The phone in my pocket contains rare earth minerals, most likely mined from child slavery, and the clothes I can afford come from sweatshops where the workers live with such low pay that they essentially become indentured servants. Even the food I eat is unethically tainted. It's just a reality of living in the world that we do. It's a thing we understandably try to mentally distance ourselves from and not think about. We all like modern conveniences and technology, and the sad truth is that we're gonna keep going on like this because none of us want to give up those goods. That's not to say we shouldn't try to push for a better world for all. I'm all for improvements that better the lives of everybody, but I also know that such change will take eons, especially with billions of people wandering this rock. But that's a topic for another day because I go on this long-winded diatribe as a way for me to express that I'm not judging anybody for enjoying the things that they enjoy. When I bring up the Saudi money in gaming, it's not to criticize average people who play those games, especially as I too enjoy similar titles. I mean, I'm also an American and we do horrible shit too. It's a leniency I offer you because it's a leniency I offer myself. The only line where my leniency ends is the point where a hypocrite's toe steps over. And with Hogwarts Legacy, a lot of toes crossed my line. Everything surrounding the game was unabashedly dishonest. From the media smearing of Troy Levitt, a creative lead on the project who was falsely labeled as alt-right, to how the media treated completion rates of the game itself. Tons of stories were run trying to paint the game as a failure because story campaign achievement numbers showed how few actually beat it. But this is far from new. It's been well known for over a decade that gamers rarely finish single-player games, something that has been reported on many times over the years, by the same websites now weaponizing the stat. Articles discussing the game in a positive light couldn't even do so without linking to pieces about the harm caused by J.K. Rowling, something that isn't widely done for games created by Blizzard, Riot, or any other studio known for its abusive workplace culture. The entire controversy just felt forced, and dare I say, fake. It was a bunch of people wanting to elevate their identities to such a degree that they could earn sympathy bucks from it, acting as if they were being targeted by the game because grievance mongering is the new social currency. It was a race to find the biggest victim, the world's largest pity party. The entire situation was unaided by the fact that it was an easy target. A lot of these people had no intentions of playing it, and it takes no effort to act morally superior when you have no soldiers in the fight, as evidenced by them being unable to quit games made under worse circumstances and funding even worse people. It's what we call slacktivism. It's the notion of judging others for not giving up something they had no need to give up themselves, but ask them to give up entertainment they hold dear and they can't do it. It's lazy, or as I said earlier, it was performative and fraudulent moral superiority. Worse yet, it created a tide of resentment. This once again leans into my trans activists are their own worst enemies video, but if you go around labeling people bigots for playing a video game, or viciously attacking them for daring to enjoy it, all you're doing is making enemies. You're shooting trans people in the foot, crippling them, because this is the truth. Most people playing that game are not hateful, nor are they bigots in any sense of the word. Harry Potter is one of the largest franchises to ever exist. It's a book series that swept the globe and introduced millions to the joy of reading. You ask most people, and they've read it, and they've enjoyed it. And regardless of the views of its creator, the fond memories people have of the series won't magically become stripped away. Hogwarts Legacy was never a game that was going to fail. It was destined to become a success, and calling normal people names for aiding in that success will only serve as a detriment to LGBT people everywhere. The backlash to its existence and the hate it kicked up for gamers from across every side of the spectrum was bad PR through and through. All it did was ignite feelings of resentment towards the people doing the name calling, and in years from now, when gamers are asked, who radicalized you, they may just answer, you did. With Harry Potter thankfully out of the way, let's talk about a sign. I need to talk about a sign. Oh my god, I hate journalists. At the MagFest Gaming and Nerd Culture convention that took place this past year, there was a literal sign on the show floor that offered directions to those visiting the event, and at the bottom of it was a mild jab at Kotaku, which read, "Kotaku's journalistic integrity, 404, not found." To anyone within the gaming sphere, it's a fairly valid joke to make at the expense of a website known for rage baiting, and for the publication of articles that misrepresent current topics, often with an extremely obvious slant. It would take hours to run through all the things this website is fucked up on, but some of my favorites are the time a PlayStation 5 console review began discussing Biden, Trump, and other political goings-on, or when Laura Kate Dale accused Persona 5 of using the R slur in a song. Never mind, it doesn't. On top of all that is the mishandling of easily 100 different controversies. People are constantly portrayed in the most misleading of light. There's also the time they posted explicit art of underage characters having sex. That last point is 100% serious, by the way. The article was eventually wiped clean with all images removed, but the writer only moved upwards in her career and ultimately helped write the upcoming Goodbye Volcano High. I don't know how to segue off that, but yeah, Kotaku sucks, and it trends on Twitter every other week because of how much it sucks. So to gamers, it was a funny sign. Yet to those within gaming media, it was a violent attack on their person, and they lost their damn minds. By his own admittance, Patrick Klepek spent part of his day on the phone ensuring it got removed, and Rebecca Valentine, a senior reporter for IGN, would go on to do what these types do best: raise up diverse people as a shield to deflect criticism. As is to be expected, the convention lacked backbone and eventually pulled the sign while apologizing for making people feel unsafe. And that is the crux of the problem. The sign didn't make anybody feel unsafe. Nobody was threatened by it or at the risk of harm. That is just the go-to tactic for cry bullies who get off on being emotional terrorists. They claim that diverse lives are at risk and guilt people into doing what they want. It's a tactic they use time and time again. It's the only means they have of obtaining any semblance of power. It was, at its core, a stupid controversy, pushed along by people who feigned major offense at the most milquetoast of things. Like, look at it. It is the tamest of jabs. But it doesn't matter, because the people who love whining raise themselves into a frenzy because they were handed a new means of victimization. At a deeper level, below the depths of my standard attitude of joking about everything, it's exhausting. The sheer power these piss babies have throughout the industry keeps ensuring instances like this continue happening. They hold such sway they got a single convention none of them were at to not just remove a sign, but to bend over backwards apologizing for it. It's further not lost on me who these people are. The same bloggers losing their minds at being the target of a joke are the very same ones I've covered before, as they often lead the charge throughout various cancel crusades, targeting anyone who so much as has an opinion that doesn't toe their strict ideological line. And they will go to great lengths to ensure their targets lose financial and job security. Which is really just gross. Don't make jokes about me, but I'm gonna ruin your life if you have a different opinion. And that's what it is. But moving on to a lighter topic, racism. Gaming is never allowed to be free of meaningless controversies, and if I wore panties, the current one would have them in a bunch. Final Fantasy XVI is facing accusations of racism because it lacks a diverse cast, and I find that to be terribly detrimental to art and storytelling. The game itself takes place in a patriarchal monoculture loosely based on medieval history, and there are valid stories to be told within such spaces. Art would become stale if we weren't allowed to explore cultures and fictionalized worlds that lack diversity. It also underserves tales based on reality. One of my all-time favorite movies is Boys in the Hood, and suppose that film needed to hit a diversity quota of different races and gender. It would completely dismantle what the creators are trying to convey. It taking place in a primarily black neighborhood and following a group of black males trapped within the walls of gang violence is vital to the social commentary it espouses. And I know when certain types wail about diversity that they simply mean non-white male, but it is a two-way street, and just as Boys in the Hood is a valid perspective, so too is something like Gangs in New York, a film about fictional Irish mobsters residing in the 5 Point slums in 1846. Where Final Fantasy XVI is concerned, it also finds itself in a difficult position because it has themes of slavery. But if it had black slave owners or black slaves, let's not kid ourselves. These same journalists would lose their minds and create controversy surrounding that. More so as the game also has instances of hate crime. It's a no-win situation. I'd also add that for a group of people known to complain about colonialism and cultural appropriation, I find it pretty rich that they're trying to force their Americanized left-wing ideals on a group of Japanese developers. But that's all I want to say on that for now, because I'll be revisiting this topic at length in a future video, which is a good thing because damn is this current one getting longer than I initially intended. So I think I'll move on from controversies, as I'm pretty sure I got the main ones I wanted to speak on out of my system. Actually, no, I lied. I'd like to call out the anti-consumer nature of Babylon's Fall, a game which released in March 2022 and which went offline in February 2023. It was a pretty bad game, and one I 100% and platinumed because I hate myself and am filled to the brim with self-loathing, but I'll save that for my therapist. The problem with the game isn't that it failed and couldn't sustain an audience. It's that it was a full price release when it launched a year ago, and being online only, people who paid for it, and even the psychopaths who enjoy it, they can no longer play something they spent $60+ on. As a game that can be entirely played single player, it's gross that it wasn't patched to accommodate offline mode before shutting down. As said, anti-consumer as hell, and something that weirdly wasn't covered as much from that angle as it should have been. I guess because it was a bad game, the moves were justified. I don't know. There's way more controversies that I haven't addressed, such as the continued backlash towards 6 Days in Fallujah, or issues regarding games developed in Russia and Ukraine, but I'm going to shelve those for now and instead talk about some of the bigger games I played, quickfire style. I did not like God of War Ragnarok. As I do most games, I 100%ed it at launch, and I thought it sucked. Fancy production values aside, I found the structure to be old and rotten. In my opinion, the level design was a boring blight, the puzzles were hardly puzzles, and the story was a slog. I hated with a deep passion the Atreus sections. I thought it was horrendously paced. If I was to offer it a compliment, it'd be that the music is still top tier and the boss fights, while still not amazing, were better than 2018's God of War, although I do think that game was way better as a whole. My thoughts on this game have been a point of contention, so allow me to stress that if you disagree, I'm happy. Spending full price on a game and disliking it isn't fun, and so I'm genuinely glad you got your money's worth. I hardly think my opinion is a gold standard everyone must abide by, so just please understand that my criticisms of a game are not criticisms of you. Unless you like Sonic, then I think your head needs a checkup. Other things I played were Thymesia, which I do recommend if you're looking for Sekiro-like with visuals along the lines of a cheap Bloodborne. Just know that it's a low-budget game made in Taiwan, and it shows its budget. I did find it overpriced at launch. $20 would have served it better than 30, but taken as what it is, I had fun with it. Similarly, there's Wolong Vol and Dynasty. As a fan of Neo 1 and 2, I was excited for this, and like most games, I platinumed it at launch, humble brag. But once again, I didn't like it. It just felt clunky to me, and for a game designed around deflection, it didn't feel fine-tuned. It has probably been patched numerous times since I touched it, so perhaps it feels less jank now, just beware is all. Next up is Steel Rising. Easily Spider's best game to date. I think they're not yet at a point where I can say they have a great game, but they are hitting good enough territory, and I'm excited to see where they go next. It's a studio that continues to improve with each new release, and I deeply respect that. Another thing I respect is Dead Space Remake, because wow, that one shocked me. Being a remake of one of the best horror games of the 360 era was a risky venture I had zero faith EA could pull off, but damn is it good. It improves a few things over the original and is a must-play, which is a good thing because I had put my hopes and dreams into Callisto Protocol's basket, and I didn't like it. I know it's been patched since I 100%ed at launch, with combat improvements among other things, so it probably plays much better. But at the time, the combat felt rough. I also hated the level design. I was actually stoked by how linear it is, as too many games these days are getting too large. But Callisto is full of squeeze-throughs that don't take advantage of the horror setting, and it just felt like a slog. It also lacked intention and horror. I never once felt edge of my seat, and in a game that looks as good as it does, to misstep on the atmosphere aspect is crazy to me. But oh well, at least Dead Space retook the crown. As for other horror titles, I did check out The Last of Us remake. It's a complicated one though, because I never really appreciated the original release of that game, and I always found the hype surrounding it misplaced, but something clicked this time. I still don't think it's one of the best 10 games to ever release or whatever, but it is good. I just don't think the remake was needed, especially at a $70 price point. I imagine if I'd played the PS4 remastered version, I'd have felt the same way, so I think I recommend that. Rewinding back to Dead Space, as much as I like it, it's not my favorite game of the year, as that award goes to Trackmania. I got the PS5 version and I'm having a blast. It does have a questionable monetization system, which is a knock against it, but in terms of pure gameplay and the feeling of accomplishment it brings, it's unmatched. Nailing an author medal time is orgasmic. Good stuff. Just to get a few more out of the way, Asanzo is a World War I competitive shooter, and it's pretty good. Intense is a good word for it. I'm all for more realistic and difficult online FPSs, and it scratched an itch. Then there's Resident Evil 4 Remake, which is a difficult one for me to address. It's a bona fide good game that I struggle to appreciate as much as everybody else because RE4 has always been far from my favorite within the series. I'm outside the norm on that though. And most of you will love it, especially as it is a good remake. I'm not knocking it, it's just not for me. Oh my god, we have more, so speeding through even more games. I finally played Tunic, and fuck me does it deserve appreciation for the deepness of its puzzles. Some aspects of it will blow your mind. Keeping in line with animal games, I played Stray at launch, and it was fine. I think what I said on Twitter sums it up best. As a single playthrough game, I give it a 7 out of 10. It's cute and mechanically simple, and I enjoyed it for what it is, but playing it a second time for the platinum was a bad idea. There's not enough to sustain a repeat viewing, and tiny annoyances add up. My advice, play it once. That same advice I'd give to Arcade Paradise, although this one will last you much longer during said playthrough, and I believe certain gamers will deeply appreciate it. I know I did. The gist is that you manage a laundromat, starting off by doing boring tasks, but over time you turn it into an arcade with a surprising amount of fully playable machines. There's like 40 plus in there, and a lot of them are fun as hell. I do have a few complaints, like the secondary currency is earned too slow, as the stuff you buy with it costs too much. Similarly, a few machine completion goals are super grindy, but as a whole, I really enjoyed it. It's super chill, as was Cult of the Lamb, although it did wear out its welcome a little bit. It's cute for a while, but the roguelike elements were lacking, and I wish it was a bit deeper. I did get some good laughs naming characters after people I know, and then force-feeding them poop. Have I mentioned I'm in therapy? Once again, I don't know how to segue off that, so here's a few more games. Sifu, good stuff. The combat is satisfying. I hope we get a sequel with even more levels. Saints Row, I played that too. There's a video on my channel as of last week. The game sucks, but the video is good. Go watch it. And finally, lastly, there's Hogwarts Legacy. I thought it was incredibly mid, maybe even less so, which was disappointing as I really wanted it to be good as there's a rich universe there to explore, but the design was lacking in many ways. The enemy variety is exceptionally weak, and for a universe full of fantastical creatures, the things you fight are just stupid. The design for a repeatable statue boss is especially lame. Plot-wise, it's okay, but it really nails the dramatic highs. I felt largely detached from it. The biggest issue with the game though is that it has content on top of content, but the vast majority of it is uninteresting and frankly just lazy. This is honestly one of the lamest open worlds I've touched in quite a while. Like, it's on par or worse than Ubisoft Bloat. There's 100-ish caves to explore, but they're mostly the same, as is everything else. You'll follow butterflies, pop balloons, look for invisible parchment, and complete 95 insanely repetitive Merlin challenges, and it just isn't fun. The world simply didn't need to be as large as it is, and it didn't need the extreme copy-pasted content that fills it. It also lacks in interactivity. For some weird reason, you can't even use spells to toy with fellow students. You can't levitate them or do anything. I will say the artistic design is on point, like the castle's absolutely gorgeous, but there's almost nothing enjoyable to do in it. The bulk of its content is using focus vision, or a spell, to find a piece of parchment. That's it. That's what you do in the castle. Combat-wise, things work well, and mixing and matching spells allows for bursts of fun, but this enjoyment is reined in by the lack of enemy variety. I can only kill so many of the same spiders or goblins. It's further hurt by a lack of good bosses. At the end of the day, I was really disappointed. I enjoyed the books as a kid and even used to go to the midnight releases, so exploring Hogwarts and the Forbidden Forest excited me, but I found the experience to be vapid, hollow, and lazy. The game design just fails on many levels. A mediocre game that didn't deserve the controversy that surrounded it in more ways than one. And yeah, those are the bigger games I played since May of last year. Oh, there is one more I need to mention. The Last Aura Crew. This game is jank personified and it's flawed up to the wazoo, but man did I love it. It's a game I'd struggle to score higher than a 4.5 out of 10 as it feels pretty awful to play, but it contains so much heart and charm that I only wish the developers the very best. It also has so many branching plot points. It attempts to do more with its story than most modern AAA games, and I find that commendable, even if the game itself isn't very good. If I could compare it to something, I'd say it's this generation's Alpha Protocol. For me, anyways, as I think even people who like that one will struggle to appreciate Aura Crew as much as I did. But I think I'm done now because wow, this got long. Let me just end on one thing. Succession. Easily one of the best shows of the past decade. Watch it, like right now, because this video is over. Bye, and thank you for watching.
Crashed on a planet, Ilder ran his homie. Zara taking orders, but Ilder was so lonely. Started making money on Naboru and the Ratkins. Finally got to realize it really wasn't happening. Making monsters became his one obsession. Armies for the future, in a new direction. Cool dreaming, thinking of the old days. Wished he had a spaceship to get him on his way. Big Dilmar.
Good old days.